So, okay, my friends, I'm back and I'm connected. Yeah. So we were talking about the Uruk period, right? So we will see, and I want us to um, notice something as far as the chronology is concerned, and that's the following. Um, well, before going to that, let me just continue with this Uruk period, right? Um, okay. So okay, I wanted to go to this chronology. Oh, yes, I'm in the wrong. Okay, open in Safari, right? So yes, okay. So I was right. So you look at it, right, and you see that already by um, in the Ubaid period, right, you have the cities, right? You have the cities. You have the city of Eridu that is being founded already by 5000 BC. You have rudiments, right, of sort of a cuneiform script, right? And 5000, you come to the Ubaid period, right? So, and then one of the things that I want you to keep in mind is that one of the ways to figure out, right, what a culture thought in terms of creation and life and death, and in their spirituality, one of the ways to figure that out is to look at their burial costumes, right? And the fact that the Egyptians buried, sort of attendants of important figures with the figures, together with their wealth, or and whatnot, says something about the Egyptian conception of afterlife, doesn't it? Right. So this is evidence of burial in Sumer, and then you see that already 4500 BCE you have the first temples, right? And then by 4500 BCE it is that you see the city of Uruk being founded, right? Already the invention of writing is at the Uruk period. You see here 3600 BCE, right? And by 3500 BCE, you have the first written evidence of religion in Sumerian cuneiform, right? Um, so, yeah, 3200 is a written language, and then I want you to pay attention, right? We are still in the Uruk period, right? And circa 2500 BCE, we get the beginning of literature in Sumerian, right? Included in which is, 2350 BCE, right? A code of law, first code of law, right? And we will get to law and legal issues and what has that to do with our contemporary existence later on. But the first law codes here you see by the king of Lagash, Urukagina, right? 2350 BCE, right? After which time you will see the Epic of Gilgamesh coming, and then we get the Ur-3 period and the Sumerian Renaissance, and it is in this Ur-3 period that we see the Great Wall of Uruk, right? Is still which is still standing, right? And then by the time we get to the 1700, we get to the Amorites, which are another Semitic population, and which we will be talking about, right? So that is as far as our chronology is concerned, my friends, right? So you see that a lot of important events take place in the Uruk period, and we will talk about economy, society, and so forth in a moment. But this is the chronology, right? So what I want you to remember, and remember distinctly, yeah, i.e., I mean, you cannot read my lips, my friends, right? But try to read my lips, right? At the end of the Uruk period, right? At the end of the Uruk period, you have a major destructive flood, right? A major, um, like really destructive flood, right? Some people argue that this was regional, right? Had to do with the flooding of Euphrates, right? And that's why we get this tremendous flood in Western Asia. Others say no, this affected the globe itself, right? Why? Okay, here's why. Because the after the last glacial maximum, right? After the last glacial, right, maximum, which happened around, and you see here, 24,000 years ago. And now I want us to remember, my friends, right? So our ancestors began coming out of Africa 40,000 years ago, right? By 24 to 22,000 years ago, there is the end of an ice age, last glacial, right? After which point the temperature rises, right? The ice melts, right? And you see here on the right hand side change in sea level in meters, right? And you see various straits, excuse me, and seas here, right? Having sort of risen, right? So, but at any rate, one thing is for sure. We know that in the Euphrates, right, we had a great flood, right? Okay, so, yeah, okay, so let me clear this for here. I'm sure this is going to be recorded, all of this, right? Okay, so then the question is, my friends, right? This is 2000 BCE, right? Right. It is kind of close to the date that we've been told that that the Semitic populations, right, begin to come, right, in Mesopotamia. And then lo and behold, right, we have in our religious texts, right, the evidence, in fact, of a very important flood, right? Very important flood, the Noah's flood, right? And we will see again where the evidence of this flood, how the evidence of this flood, right, i.e. most probably the flood of 2900 BCE, how the evidence of this flood was transmitted through Sumerian texts, right, to the religious texts that to this day, right, to this day we use, right? Okay, my friends, and it has it is not just the evidence of a flood. It has tremendous implications for for the relationship of man to God, for the way you think, or the creation could have begun, and so on and so forth, right? In our religious sensibilities, right? At any rate, so this flood happens, right? And after the flood begins the early dynastic period, right? After the Uruk period, which ends with the flood here, right, begins the early dynastic period. And after that, as I said, the early dynastic period goes from 2900 to 2334, as we saw in the beginning of our um, lecture, right? And then the period of Akkadians, which is rather short, I told you, right, is right after this early dynastic, right? Comes the early dynastic, right? When a great king, right, great king appears in Acadia, in Akkad, right? We will see where Akkad is located in a second, right? And a king, right, is is born, so to speak, and rules, right? Which is his name is Sargon, right? Sargon of Akkad, and he kind of begins, yeah, uh, the first attempt at creating an empire, right? Sargon of Akkad, and we will see about that in a second. This whole notion of early dynastic period, it was named such, right? Again by our sort of Orientalists, right? 19th century, those 19th century fellows, right? Scientists, right? To whom we owe a great debt of gratitude, right? Although they were functioning in a colonial setup, right? He called it the Orientalist Henry Frankfurt, right? Who died in 1954. He called it the early dynastic period, right, of Mesopotamia, in order to be able to compare it to Egypt. But that is not a very valid comparison, right? Because, as we will see, the Mesopotamian political structure, right, being, excuse me, being formed out of city-states, right, which were separate from each other, right, because of the nature of the terrain that we talked about, right, and the city-state, the political sort of system of Babylonia was city-states, right, i.e. fragmentation, right? One city-state might have developed something and might have guarded it very, very closely from another city-state, right? And so on and so forth, right? But that is not the case, as we will see. That is not the case in Egypt, right? Because in Egypt we have the Nile, right, and which is a river that floods, right, but floods, as we will see, very, very magnanimously for its human population, for the human population that lives around it, right? So and therefore lends itself, Egyptian system, political system, lends itself to a centralized government, right? Where one government is taking care of the region, as opposed to the Mesopotamian system that we will be talking about again more, right? Um, so so although, right, we had irrigation and the domestication of plants and animals in 8,000 BCE, right? In Not in Mesopotamia, right? The first plants and the first animals were not domesticated in Mesopotamia, but as you will hear in one of your videos, also in Syria and southeastern Anatolia. So although that was the case, right, and agriculture did not reach Mesopotamia before 5,000 BCE, right? Nevertheless, we have the um, the civilization that developed, right, in these areas. Now, one of the things that is very, very important as far as Tigris and Euphrates is concerned, of course, I should have started with this, is the ability the ability to tame, right, this destructive force that is the river, and this life-giving force that is the river, right? Because with the river, you get two things, right? You get transportation, right? That's one thing, right? You can come down the Tigris and Euphrates, right, and go with your ships and go into the Persian Gulf, right? Right. Um, okay. Okay, you have transportation, but the second thing that you have is the ability, right, to water agricultural land, right? To try to tame this river, right, to become your life force, right? Because otherwise you could not, you had to do something with the river because it didn't rain enough in the region, right? And in order to do dry farming, right, you need to have at least 8 inches of rain a year, right? 20 centimeters, and Mesopotamia didn't even get that, right? So, my friends, okay, so okay, we talked all about this, right? Hot and dry climate, right? Okay, so in order to do irrigation, right, and the order might be a little bit different here, but in order to do irrigation, the first thing, if you want to water your land, right, you have to take the water from the river, right, and put it on your land, right? So what you want to do is you want to create canals, right, for directing this water, right? You want to not let it always dictate your life, right? You want to make it sort of create life for you, right? So the first thing that you need to do, and we will see how you did that, right, is the construction of canals. But you have to remember, right, the construction of canals and whatnot, right, requires calculation, right? You have to know measurements. You have to know you have to know whether or not you have to have a concept even of gravity to, for instance, know that water comes down from high up, right? So that you can create dikes and whatnot and dams, right? So you need you are in you will have to engage in engineering, right, my friends? And those of you who are sort of majoring in engineering know that the first thing that you need for being an engineer is mathematics, right? You need mathematics in order to do engineering. You need all kinds of other sciences. You probably need to know trigonometry, right? And so on and so forth. You I have to ask my husband this, but figuring out the square root of a number, right, must also have come handy for you because you did that, right? You got the square roots of numbers and so on. So you engaged in mathematics, you engaged in, but you also engaged in mathematics and engineering, but you also engaged in technology, right? You realized, right, once you had tamed your cattle, right, you realized that this cattle has a lot of force, right? Yeah. So if you are taking I forget what you call them, to dig the earth with, right? And you're using your muscles, right? All of a sudden it occurs to you, why my muscles? Why not the animals, right? So anyway, so you begin to, to be able, you begin to put the animals to technological to the use of creating technologies, right, in order to irrigate. And what do you create, right? You create ox-drawn plows, right? And you have them already around 4000 BCE in Mesopotamia, but and you cultivate your land, but you realize that, okay, one of the things that rivers do is bring all these nice nutrients, right, down with them. That is called silt, right? Silt. From along the way up in the mountains, it brings it down, right? And this becomes very, very rich soil, right? For cultivation, in fact, right? So you can use that silt as well, right, for cultivation. But you have to make sure that your canals are not filled up eventually by silt, right? So you have to make sure that you keep these canals, right, also sort of clean all the time. So you have your ox-drawn plows, right? And you realize that, okay, you can only cultivate on your soil so much, right? Because the soil needs to replenish itself and get, and every time you cultivate, the nutrients of the soil go into the plant that you get, right? But if you do that too much, your soil gets does not have any nutrients left. So every once in a while, every once in a while, you have to leave parts of, forget about this, my friends, you have to figure out, you have to leave part of your land empty, fallow, right? Yeah. Excuse me. Or is it fallow? Let me see, my friends. Okay. Is it fallow or is it follow? Fallow. Yeah, it's fallow. Okay, my friends. You leave the land fallow, right? But, unsown, meaning not cultivated, right? To restore its fertility, right? That's what you do, right? But you have another technology, right, that you have developed also. And that is a way in which instead of using your hands and and throw the seeds haphazardly, right, for them to grow haphazardly, you can give some order to it, right? You can measure the amount of seed, right, that goes on the land at every section of the land, right? So with the ox-drawn plows, right, here is our ox-drawn plows, and again, you need engineering, you need mathematics, you need all these sciences, right, to come up with these new technologies, right? And it's not only that new technology, it's not I mean back 4 or 5 thousand years ago, these were new technologies, right? They are now ancient technologies for us, but they are technologies that are still being used, right, in parts of the world, right? Just like our religious sentiments that we will get to, okay. So, and we will see other sort of important advances that the Mesopotamians made, right, including the number system, for instance, and thinking as the measure of time, as measure of everything. 60, right? You have a decimal, and because it can be divided by many numbers, right? And then from that you get your 360 60 sort of days of the year, right? The astronomical observations of the sky, right? That we talked about, right? That comes also from the Mesopotamians now, and so on and so forth. And we will get a chance of getting a little bit further into those also. So these plows, right, as you can see, are used the same way that they were used like thousands of years ago, right, in some farmlands, right, and I'm afraid I didn't check where this picture is coming from. It's probably in Iraq, right, in modern day Iraq, which is your Mesopotamia, right? So these irrigation networks and canals brought water, river from the water from the river to the field, right? You created, oops. Okay, you created drainage systems, right, to bring back the water to the river before it evaporates, right, and puts harmful salt and minerals on the surface, right? You make partial dams to raise the water level of the river so that the water could flow by gravity into the canals, right? So, my friends, you were as smart as your contemporary man, right? You were the first to try to control the nature around yourself, right? So, and then you get to have this kind of canal. Okay. So let's look at this schema. Incidentally, you remember that we talked about the fact that from it is the first maps also were created by the Mesopotamian, right? Now this is a map from the city of Nippur, right? Another major city. This is a map of around 1500 BCE, right? So so this is during the yeah, in 1500 BCE. If I'm mistaken, we are still in the Amorite period in 1500 BCE. But I want you to look at the map, right? So, and you see here, right? So you see that there you have a town called Karnusku town, right? A township or a city, right? It's called Karnusku. Maybe the Karnusku is the king or some important sort of figure in your society, right? So you see, and whoever he is certainly rich, right? Because he has the ability, right, of having a large. I'm sorry. Okay, having a large field, right, which is watered by the canals that probably you have sort of instructed to be built, right, or the Karnusku might it might be some priest, right? And here you see the backfields of the divination priests. So here you realize, right? You here realize that, oh, priests have a lot of power and wealth, right? Just like today, right? Yeah. If you want to have a Christian wedding, right, you go to a priest. If you want, if somebody passes away, you need a priest, right? You give alms to the priest for the upkeep of the church, right? And so on and so forth. He has the power over your um, over your spirituality. What is more important than that, right? And you're powerful and you're wealthy already in Mesopotamian times, right? So this is the city gates of the divination priests, right? And here is Ludu Fields, right? This is about Balu town, right? Belshan fields, right? And here you have fields between the canals belonging to the palace, to the king, right? And again you have fields for the priest, and lo and behold, you have even a field of the god Marduk, right? And you have the Marduk town, right? And Marduk is one of the most important gods in Sumeria. One of the gods that whereas it, prior to this, basically each city had its god, yeah, and the gods might vie with each other, right, from city to city. But Marduk was one of the gods that most city-states believed in, right? Forgive my... Okay. So to continue, right? To continue again with our irrigation projects, right? We talked about this. Silt required frequent dredging, right? And so therefore you have a sophisticated sort of system for the distribution of power, distribution of water, right? But who gets how much water, for instance, right? Where does the water go? Where does the water go first before depositing its silt, for example? Yeah. So who does all of this, right? You need to have a leader, right? You need to have a leader. You need to have a leader now, right, to manage your sophisticated irrigation system. You need a leader for harvesting, harvesting. You need a leader for sheep shearing, right? For building fortifications, which you will come to build because the cities, right, want the resources of one another, right? That the cities might be fighting, right? Warfare requires labor management, right? Large buildings requires labor management, and lo and behold, you already are kind of having different populations engaged in different sort of activities, right? So you begin to have different social classes, don't you? Right? You begin to have your rich and powerful, right? And your have-nots, right? And so on and so forth, right? So then, this is what your village comes to look like, right? You don't forget, you're living by the river, right? And you're living by a river that leads to another body of water, right? And it leads to another body of water. So one of the first innovations, one of the first matters that Mesopotamian men and women realized, right, is that you need a vehicle, right, for transporting not only goods on water, right, obviously, but also humans, right? And then therefore you have the first ships and boats that are being built. And you do have ships. I mean, these are not ships, right, you guys? So I might get a chance to show you ships, but I don't want to waste too much time right now. Okay, so here you get a sophisticated, right, system of canals, right, and dams and so forth and so on, right? A division of water resources, right? So what did Mesopotamians plant, cultivate? What was their staple food, so to speak, right? They favored barley. Why did they favor barley? Because it could tolerate the Mesopotamian climate, right? And we talked about fields remaining fallow, unplanted every year to replenish the soil, right? But the climate, right? And here again, my friends, you see the relationship between geography, climate, and your modes of living, right? In Mesopotamia, one of the best sources for a lot of things was your date palms, right? Okay, it was your date palms, right? And you were extremely well aware of it. Not only were you well aware of it, you had populations, right? You had populations that could engage in artistic, right, renditions of what is important for you in life. In this case, right, your trees, right? Your date palms, right? They were a source that provided food for you, right? The dates itself, they provided fiber for you, as we will see, and they provided wood for you, right? But there was another thing that you had along the rivers, especially in the southern parts of Mesopotamia, and those were reeds, right? Okay. And those were reeds where you also built houses of reeds, right? Okay, my friend, houses of reeds. among other matters, right? Houses of reeds. And I want you to pay attention, you will see it in your videos, that these are not your, sort of feeble houses that that will be destroyed by one thing or the other easily, right? So so you use them. You use date palms, right? I told you. Date. Here is a painting of, I think, based on what of date palms, right? You use the reeds, right, for creating mats and creating clothing, right? As you will see in one of your videos, for for your houses and so forth and so on. And these are the way you build your houses, yeah? Small windows in order to keep the heat off, right? A central sort of courtyard for giving air and light, right? This is a sort of upper echelon home, because they are made of, walls and floors are made of brick, right? Okay, so, and women cooked over open fires on raised mud brick hearths, right? So this is how it's a typical, like, view of the houses of the wealthy, right? And then there is the houses of the reeds, right? You see a replica, right, of artistic rendition of precisely this, which is precisely this, right? So don't forget, my friends, you already have art, right, amongst other matters. So this is how your village would look like, right, in Mesopotamia, and your village life would look like, right? Your fields are here, you work on your fields, there are your animals, right? And so on and so forth. You slept on top of the roofs, right? Because it was cooler, as you will see in one of your videos, and so on and so forth. So, okay, my friends, so up to now we have talked about a lot of things that went into the making of this civilization that we call the civilization of Mesopotamia. You see that we already have complex societies, right? We have cities, we have organized government, we have art, we have religion, we have class system, class divisions, and we have a writing system. We have it all, right? In fact, we begin it all, don't we? Right? And where are we? In a place nowadays we call Iraq, right? And what it is known for? Oh, for its Shia militia, and for our invasion of the country and the destruction of its population, and so on and so forth, right? And of the country and of their livelihoods, right? And we have absolutely no regard for this. In fact, we are oblivious to it, right? I bet you half of the people who are up there making decisions, yeah, are not so much aware of this. But you are, okay? Now you are, right? You are a head and a shoulder ahead of those who don't know this, right? Okay, so again, these are your elements of civilization: public works, cities and governments, religion, social classes, writing and keeping records, right? Yeah, who gets to do what? Yeah, art and architecture, specialization of labor, and public works, right? So therefore, you can very well imagine What is your Sumerian society made of, right? This is the city of Sumer, right? What is your economy based on? Well, it primarily I mean, even today we are agrarian. agrarian agrarian societies, right? We depend on agriculture, yeah, to feed us. Even today we need agriculture to feed us, right? So the first thing that the Sumerians had, of course, was agriculture, because they had learned to domesticate the plants, the animals. They had come up with all the system that we've already talked about, right? Now, as we will see, however, right, it is not like Mesopotamia, right, in which Sumer was located, had all the resources of the world, right? So Mesopotamia could be a self-sustained society. No, no, right? There were resources that you needed, and there were resources that you didn't need. No, it was not resources, right? And there were things that you didn't need, but added joy and pleasure or whatnot to your life, right? So you traded with other civilizations, and we will see what trade had to do with the Sumerian way of life, right? So, and as far as soon as you have the city, obviously you are introducing the division of labor, right? Yeah. Okay. So we talked about this geography, right? And it's modern day Iraq, Tigris, and Mesopotamia. Government, yeah, city states. Forget about empire, city states, right? Yeah. And there is a rigid class structure to it, right? The king ultimately comes to stand there, the peasants here, and the scribes somewhere up here, for instance, and then you have your craftsmen and merchants, right? Craftsmen and merchants. Can you read my handwriting, my friends? Okay, this is one thing that I did in my classes as well, right? My handwriting on the board is not that great, and especially because, okay, never mind. So, and what is your religion, right? Do you believe in only one God? Of course not. There are different forces that are affecting you, right? That you realize that the skies can affect you. Meteors can come from the skies, for instance, right? I mean, the sun is so important and whatnot. The moon is so important for you, right? The sun is important. The moon is important. Well, it is for us too, right? That's why we have Monday, right? Yeah, which is our moon day, right? Sunday, right? Our Sunday, right? So you have different forces that are affecting you, and you want to appease, and you therefore you believe in their power, right? So it is not just one, right? It is not monotheism. Theo is God. Monotheism, right? The belief in one God. So it is not monotheism, it is polytheism, right? Many gods, right? Believe in many gods, right? Each city-state, in fact, has its own god, and so on and so forth, right, my friends? Okay. Okay, so gradually, of course, you have a king, right? The two first leaders that you get to have as important leaders, therefore, become your priests, right, and your kings, who can, sort of manage labor divisions, manage warfare, indulge in public works and so forth and so on, right? Okay, so the agriculture, yeah, in the farmers produce the agriculture land, and the produce that comes from that. The city gave the rural districts, right, what, one of the things it gave it is military protection, right? It was the kings who built the walls around the cities, right? As we will see. The cities was also where you had markets, right? For not only the sort of agricultural produce, right? But for all kinds of manufactured goods that's coming from your craftsmen, right, and tradesmen, right, bringing these goods to you, right? So the city always also sort of provides, right, um, the the city provides the marketplace for you, right? So the city state becomes a self-governing urban center, right? It is not only that urban center, but the agricultural territories that it controls, right, my friends? Okay. So, of course, you can stop and take a break, right? But let me just continue, right, and finish this session. So that is the term city-state, right? Between city-states, what lay between city-states that are usually walled, right? Uncultivated land, right? Either swamp, desert, or swamp, yeah, that provided a buffer between your cities, right? So early Mesopotamian city-states, we already know Uruk, right? Uruk, in fact, gives its name to a very brilliant period, right? In the history of region, you have the city of Ur, right? And you have the city of Lagash, and these are all important cities. You have the city of Sumer itself, Nippur, Kish, and of course in the east you have Elam, and the very, very, very ancient city, extremely ancient city of Susa, right? So this is what your city would look like, right? Your Mesopotamian city would look like. I want you to pay attention to the fact that your house of the god, which is called ziggurat, is in the center of the city. This is a major public work, right? Building of temples, right? Public work. So, one of the first people that you have in power were, we talked about it, the priests, and then the temple. You see how central the temple is to the lifeline of the city, right? And then there is the palace, right? There is the palace. And you get the housing and trades and shipping and whatnot industry, right? So this is the city of Ur, right? Maze of houses and shops, right? Massive walls that protected it from attacks, right? Right, another canal on Raj Harbor where foreigners docked their boats while they traded with Ur's merchants, right? The canals that are connected to it, farmers that are growing the food, right? A giant temple dedicated to the moon god Nana. Moon god. right? So, and then you have this question here. What can you see in this illustration that shows Ur was an advanced city? Okay, what can you see, my friends? Try to look at it and talk about it, right? All the things that we have seen, right? Feats of engineering, not only with the wall, but with the canals, right? Canal construction. Importance of religion, right? In the lives of the populations, right? The ability to undertake massive projects, right? Not only the palace and the temple, but the walls and whatnot. Density of population, right? That is being fed by the hinterland of it, right? Probably, all these people, they must have some productive role to play, right, in life, right? So division of labor here, right, and so on and so forth. So you have the elements. You're probably a massive bureaucracy, right? You have all the elements of probably, right. You certainly had the writing system. You had sciences. You could calculate. You could measure, right, and so on and so forth. In other words, being ancient, right, does not make you irrelevant, right, my friends, or all of a sudden dumb. Yeah? You create for us the conditions of civilization. You create for us the very, very instruments of elements of civilization, right? You create for us a heritage, a tradition, right? Which is then, right, co-opted, yeah, by imperialists, cultural hegemonists, right, who talk about Western civilization being born in the East, right? Well, of course, they have a point in that, right? Okay. So the walls were made of sun-dried bricks, right? Cities either fought with each other or cooperated with each other, sharing waters, allowing traders safe passage, and so on and so forth, right? The big man that I told you, or the king, appeared around 3rd millennium BC. A big man or a lugal, right? We would call him a king, right? They needed protection communities, according to one theory, right? And therefore these lugals appeared, right? But they found ways to prolong their authority, right? As Donald Trump is doing right now. And my friends, it is your civic duty. It is so important at this juncture in your life to vote. Because you don't want a king, right? Because you don't want anybody to prolong their authority over you. You want to at least have the pretense, right, of a democracy. At least the pretense, right? Okay, so, and eventually it became kind of hereditary. It went to their sons. Their power went to their sons, right? So, but you see that the temple is actually, it is at the heart of the city, right? And the king's palace comes later, right? So you think, oh my God, imagine this: priests come first, right? And then come kings, right? But at some point, the power of the king grows, right? The priests retain their influences because all life depends on them, right? If they are, if they're not a believer, right? Nana might harm them, for instance, and so on and so forth, right? So the priest retained their importance. But gradually, the kings became important, so important that they could sort of have the priests become dependent ultimately on the palace, right? And this is yet another, well, it's one of the same cities that we were talking about. Okay, so, but what was the notion of kingship, right? Political authority, right? Yeah, what kind of powers did the kings have? Were they also divine? No, they were not, right? They were not divine. They got their legitimacy from the divinity, right? Yeah, because you, the king, you are the earthly representative of the city's deity, right? Right. So by this late third millennium, right? 2100s, right? Kings assumed responsibility for the temples, maintaining city walls and defenses, irrigating, guarding property rights, warding off attacks, and establishing justice, establishing the rule of law, my friends, right? One of these kings, right, is Gilgamesh, the king of our self-same Uruk, right? And we will talk about it, about Gilgamesh and the literature and the religiosity in a different session. Okay, my friends? So Gilgamesh is a king of Uruk. Now, this is the last thing that I want to cover for you, right? And that is trade, right? Some city-states, as I said, I mean, Mesopotamia is rich in some resources, but not rich in others, right? And the same with different regions of the world in which Mesopotamia was located, right? One way of getting those resources, right, was conquest, as we are still doing today, right? You want the oil, right? You pretend like ISIS is getting the oil, wants the oil, right? And I don't know what's one, it's this and that, that. But in fact, one of the reasons that you were in Syria, right, as Trump admits, is to get the oil and keep the oil, right? So conquest gives you one way of accessing resources, right? But trade, right, offered an alternative, right? And during this period, long distance trade, right, flourished in most periods. We have evidence of seagoing vessels as early as the 5th millennium BC, my friends, right? So what would be exchanged for what, right? Wood, metal, stone came from foreign lands. In exchange for what did Mesopotamians give? Barley, cloth, wool, vegetable oil, right? So what, you need, but you didn't have wood. You didn't have much wood. You don't have much wood because you don't have trees, right, in Mesopotamia, right? But you need wood, right, for all kinds of stuff, including making homes, right? Who has woods, right? Well, at one time, the Lebanese, right, and Syria yielded cedar forests that have been so much cut now that deforestation basically in the area. But in the ancient period, cedar forests provided the wood for the Mesopotamians. Anatolians produced silver because they had silver mines, right? Egypt had, hey, didn't I tell you Egypt was rich? Egypt had gold, right? Africa was rich, right? Africa had gold. And tin, right, which you need um, to put together with copper in order to make bronze came all the way from where? Lo and behold, Afghanistan, right? Okay, so we talked about okay, so but Mesopotamia, right, had severe shortages. Therefore, right, it lacked metals and stones, right. So it imported. Look at this, my friends. Okay, you're talking about global one thing or the other, right? And we're talking about 5,000 years ago, right? Yeah, these people were in connection. They were connected together. Okay, they had their wars and this and that, right? But they were aware of each other. Yeah, in fact, much more aware than later on, say the Greeks were of the rest, right? But well, that's for just an example, right? So they had imports from Syria, Arabian Peninsula, even India. They had imports from Central Asia, right? And they exported as far as China. So look at this, my friends. I want you, this one, right? Then you will see. Yeah? Timber, therefore, came from Syria, right? And Lebanon. And here as well, right? In this part of Persian Gulf, right? Stone, right? Also from Anatolia, right? Anatolia. Okay. Copper. Well, there were copper a lot of copper, but not much in Mesopotamia itself. Carnelian precious stone, right, comes from Iran, right, or Eastern Iran, right. Lapis lazuli. We will tell lapis lazuli came from Central Asia, Afghanistan, right? And so on and so forth. Ivory, right? Ivory came here from India. It also came from Egypt and Ethiopia, and it's not on the map here, right? Okay, I want you to look at this and see what came from where, and therefore realize that this is the cuneiform world, and realize that Western Asia, right, the cuneiform world of Western Asia, right, was connected to Eastern Asia and to Central Asia, right, and East Asia, right, already in millennia ago, right? So this is more about trade. I want you to look at it, right? So Mesopotamians, therefore, Mesopotamian merchants, right, went to all these different places, right, to get all the resources that we didn't have, right, in Mesopotamia, or to get to, so and you see your trade routes, right? I mean, look at the trade routes, right? The world is connected, yeah? Which means what? Which means that ultimately, the cultures, right? And you trade, right? You not only trade goods, but you trade cultures, right? Therefore, you would see, for instance, the city of Ebla in northern Syria, right? Being just one example, being affected by spread of Mesopotamian influences. In fact, right, as you will see in one of your videos, right, had it not been for the inventions of our Mesopotamian and other Egypt and African and other ancestors, right, the Greeks would not have even come, right, as come close, right? I mean, to the creations of and inventions of the Mesopotamia, right? So merchants traded, right? With what they traded, coins are not yet there, right? So coins, we don't have coins, yeah. The trade is either barter, right? You exchange goods, right? And the value of the goods, how did you know that the goods are, you're exchanging equal goods, right? And through weights of precious metals, primarily silver, or measures of grain, you could tell, right? So this is the way Mesopotamia is connected to the rest of the world, right? Yeah. And of course, in all of that, what I have said, right, it is clear that you are talking about a world which has not only um, not not only trades in goods, but in crafts as well, right? So prepare to be amazed, as they said, yeah. So, and no, I'm sorry, I don't want to sign in. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Here we go, my friends. Please bear with me, I don't know what's happening here. Okay, my friends, this is not working at the moment. When you are going to review your material, please go on the sort of links that I have given you, and by that time, hopefully, your artisans link is going to work, and your crafts link. Yeah. Okay. We have not talked about one of the very most important inventions, the really important invention, and that's the invention of writing, right? And making records, making written records, that we have evidence of the proto, right, Sumerian writing, proto, sorry, cuneiform writing, as early as 5000 BCE. My friends, I'm going to stop here again, because sometimes if I go uh, beyond 1 hour, all kinds of problems appear in uploading and these things, and I will start another video in order to just talk about um, writing and cuneiform, after which I think I will be finished here with I mean with I will be finished with Mesopotamia. We will be finished with Mesopotamia. Okay.